Hi, Ashraf, you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay.
As is the kind of normally that I've kind of been doing with the podcast interviews that I've done up to now, I normally kind of, I guess for the benefit of our audience, kind of ask people just to give a bit of a background, I guess, in terms of, kind of how they came to start working with XR technology and a bit of an overview in terms of their, as I say, their kind of broader skills really. So could you kind of give us a bit of a background in terms of your skills and experience and kind of how you kind of came to be working on XR technology?
Hello everyone. So my name is Ashraf Hamed, working here at SAP, leading an experienced pioneering team, which means we are looking within SAP in latest technologies, emerging technologies in the market from all of the areas, which means not only XR, but also looking into Web3 technologies, and also machine learning technologies, AI, XR, blockchain, NFTs, and so on. So we're actually looking what the market has and also trying to apply into business solutions or also business outcomes. Important is that we're not just only looking into, let's say, the technology itself, but more into how can we bring them into an end-to-end business process, and also how we can help more or less than also the end users and the business users to get benefit of these technologies.
And I guess obviously, from kind of looking at your profile, you've been with SAP now for what, kind of 20 some years. What have you kind of tend to found, from, your whole time being there has been the kind of biggest innovation that's impressed you the most during your time with them?
Actually, my background is actually I'm a computer scientist. I'm studying actually here in Germany in Kaiserslautern, and interestingly, roughly when I did my studies in the end of the 90s, I did my thesis into a topic which was actually called computer graphics, and inside that computer graphics, we actually had at that time, even end of the 90s, a project to visualize actually 3D ready houses for a company. I mean, so it was a cool innovation with university and the company which made ready-made houses, and even at that time for the ready-made houses the customer could buy. For example, we then build up the houses by texturing, for example, indoor elements like rooms, like furniture, kitchens, carpets, and so on, and then based on the editing of the end users, we then rendered that. At that time, it took us 24 to 48 hours to render such a flow. And then we, of course, then had at the end interactive vermal file, which we then could then render over the browser, and then the end customer can then fly in through that houses, and also then see how their houses could look like when they were constructed based on their input. So that was end of the 90s. I mean, I just always make jokes of that because that was actually the first touch point when I started with 3D and all of the 3D elements and renderings and ray tracing at that time. And so the proud moment of that was that this was all done over the internet, and some of you might remember that this was actually 20K modem, which we then used to get data through that. It was not just gigabyte lines and whatever else, but it was more about smaller lines which needed to be done there. And again, I assume that what we have created there and what was built up there could easily now be replicated on an Raspberry Pi or even another device. But at that time, we needed to have a high-end silicon graphics servers who were then rendering all of the ray tracing sequences, which we then were created automatically out of our client server architecture.
Have you experienced or kind of seen that as the kind of technologies continue to advance at the pace that it is now, does innovation become easier because the technology is kind of there to be utilized?
Yes, I think definitely. It means at that point in time, everything was handmade, more or less. That means all of the algorithms, all of the servers. It means there was not ready-made services, solutions, which could be utilized and reused. It means everything needs to be developed natively as actually more or less as a one-off. But now I see, of course, technology is more involved into all of the areas. Of course, starting from devices over connectivity, over, of course, tools to create all kind of 3D worlds, over the all user interaction, but also other aspects which was at that time never thought about, was of course scalability, security, of course all those topics of accessibility, and so on and so on. Really make a business solution ready. It means more of these or most of these things were not thought about. But of course now the frameworks are bigger, the capabilities are much more fruitful, and also there are more elements which you could reuse and also build on, which of course now a much easier way to develop all of these 3D or XR solutions.
I guess it makes it more exciting as well, because it's kind of the technology has increased the limitation in terms of how far you can push things. So you can probably, I guess you kind of can let your creativity run wild, I guess, in terms of from an innovation point of view, and kind of what you want to do.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I see it also if you talk on the word of Metaverse, if you want to go one step further. I mean, I see it as a bunch of technologies which have capabilities. I mean, you have all of the great tools which are available. In the past, you didn't have them. It means you need to use your limited tool set, but now we have all the full set of capabilities and tools and platforms that you can use as a carpenter. And then you can create and start your creativity to say, okay, I'll take the best rendering platform, I take the best streaming platform, I take the best this, and this. And now I can start imagining more of building up my solution and also my solution or my software or my whatever you want to call it, and less about what tools I have and what limitation the tools have. And if you look also as a small example about also now happening, for example, in the market now with ChatGPT and all of these enhancements and also all of these capabilities that we have with generative AI. This is actually currently what we are currently analyzing. This is developed in months and quarters. That means new great updates, less than in the past in years and decades where capabilities are coming in. So that's something which is really, I would say, amazing, because now we can more look into the outcomes and more look into the problems you want to solve and less about the tools and the frameworks which are available, because they are developing really in a rapid and call it speed of light speed.
Yeah. So I guess in your opinion, I mean, we might as well kind of move on to the metaverse, as everyone's kind of talking about it, but why do you think it matters? Or why do you think the metaverse is important versus just carrying on, I guess, with, kind of augmented or virtual reality and things like that? Why do you think it's kind of important?
I mean, it's the importance is based, what we always say within my areas on the use case. I mean, we are, of course, more looking into business use cases. As you might know, that SAP is more of a business solution oriented company, which means we are serving, of course, mainly businesses and companies. You might not be at one location, but you might have town square meetings across the world with businesses and private topics. You might work as with augmented reality to overlay the real world with lots of magic AI-powered features. This is more about get personal information based on the work which you're doing. For example, that you're done, for example, as a business role, you need to solve a specific business problem. For example, as a service technician, you're standing in front of a machine, you want to augment information, or you are traveling and you want to get real-time information based on the location where you are. You have simulations, which is more about realistic physics and impressive renderings of the world. So think about digital twins and, for example, digital assets which you have, for example, in a plant, the warehouse, in a factory, implementation over operations, over upgrades on how this hierarchy of digital twins of real machines or real assets actually work. And then, of course, you have the industrial metaverse, which is actually then a network of digital twins providing insight with real-time data, which is then actually the combination of the first three which I mentioned, plus, of course, your business planning software or your enterprise resource planning software on top of that. And there are incredible, let's say, developments which are currently going on in the market, which you see where you can simulate whole plants and whole warehouses before they even are built up.
Yeah, I mean, I read the recent report that MIT produced with Siemens about the kind of metaverse that they published a few days ago, and I think definitely I think of the kind of three metaverses, the kind of consumer, enterprise, and industrial. The industrial definitely seems to have more potential for kind of growth and more potential for being success over the kind of other two, really, because of the use cases.
Yeah, of course. Of the use case, but at the end of the day, I mean, it's like everything. It's exciting technology, and if also you look at the Gartner Hype curve at the end of the day, when the hype is down and actually now the more realism is coming into it, at the end it's also all about, it sounds bad, but it's all about money. It's at the end all about investment, also about usage, and also about the business benefit you get out of it. I mean, again, I always say that if you have a 3D rendering of your real world, and you call it Metaverse, however, how cool it is in the different business scenarios or even private scenarios, you need to have a benefit out of it. And the benefit not only to have it in the 3D real world, but also to have additional features, or what also I was imagining since a long time is, of course, looking how you could imagine new capabilities, and new solutions to traditional business problems, or how you can also find new business solutions, more or less, which you cannot find without technologies. I mean, I always say, okay, you can always pre-pandemic sit in front of the computer and do your work, have it in 2D, or also you can also do things actually without AI and also without Metaverse, but there must be something which you can do more efficiently, effectively, or you find out new business models and also new ways how to solve topics, or you have new ideas how you can do things completely different, or new areas you can find also new business models. And that's something which is the I would say the cherry on the cake, more or less, which you always need to find out. It means what is it what you can do with these technologies which you cannot do before.
What do you think will be the biggest turning point for the metaverse that kind of sees it become mainstream?
I mean, as you also previously said, that means perhaps you need to distinguish a little bit between private life and business life.
Yeah. But I guess if you look at it from an industrial setting, then, I mean, what do you think will be the biggest, or well, first I think, do you think there will be a turning point? And if so, kind of what do you think it will be, where it becomes kind of, mass adoption and literally every single company is using it?
I would say, as I mentioned, the business benefits and business outcomes are the important thing. I still see that Metaverse for us, or how we define it, is not necessarily only the XR component, that means extended reality component with immersive computing. I see it more about Web3 plus the whole digital twin, AI, and of course generative AI, low-code, no-code platforms with visualization. On top, as an option, it could be extended reality with mixed, virtual, or augmented, or 3D real-time rendering. But what I see is more about in the industrial space is the whole topic of, or the multiple use cases, for example. As I mentioned previously, the whole simulation area, I see actually this is one of the biggest topic with industrial metaverse. Yeah. Which is a network of digital twins with, let's say, physical assets in the digital world. For example, that you really simulate the real world which you have in a warehouse, in a plant, for example, a retail store, or whatever else, like the real world, and then can start your planning, your simulation, which means you can simulate then production lines and optimize them, and of course at the end then doing the operation. That means you can operate on the same model. That means that you can really then in a car manufacturing plant have first the planning, and then have all of the real world rendering how it could look like before it even is built up. Then start with the digital twins and also with your optimization software, or could be also your ERP systems or enterprise resource planning solutions. Then doing the simulation. Then you build the plant or you build your warehouse, and then you start the operations, which means then you can operate exactly what you have done there. Yeah. And then start to really also in real time see how the whole operation is done, if you have faultages, outages, and how this also will behave into your daily life, and how, of course, you could do optimizations or risk mitigations on that. And we say, okay, how can I mitigate my risk that not the whole plant is stopping because I have one, for example, one station is not working at all, and how can I optimize that? And then, of course, in extension, think about, you have built up that plant, it's running fine, and then suddenly your car production or your car production output needs to be increased by 30%. or 40%. How do you do this? I mean, again, take your original plan, simulate and extend it, and also save time because you exactly know how to do that, and then use it again iteratively in the next step of operations. You have the real-time aspect that really everything is what is happening in the real world is real-time, also available in your call it metaverse-like environments.
Yeah.
It is interconnected that everyone can participate. That means I can perhaps, if I steal my car, of course it depends on data protection, data security, and all of these kind of regulation. But I can now see that in front of me there's a traffic jam or whatever else. Is simple features, but it could also be more complex on that with car-by-car communication and so on. And then, of course, you have all of the persistent data available where you can also predict and also do projection for the future. And again, it could be a mashup of private life, public life, business, like that. But that's again not just only connected or let's say focused on one plant or focused on one business scenario. In the future, it might be that everything is interconnected to each other. Again, depends a little bit on all of the regulations that you have on security, on data privacy and data security, of course, which is also an important point, but there could be endless of possibilities. And I sense like it could be a starting point like what we had in the internet with and these kind of opportunities.
I mean, obviously, with so many different component parts, like you mentioned, like things like kind of IoT and kind of artificial intelligence and, kind of XR and that sort of things. I mean, obviously, there's a heck of a lot of moving parts there. I mean, do you think it will be kind of everything will run on a single, or it will reach the point where it'll be a single platform that everything is then connected to? Because I think the biggest thing that comes up with a lot of conversations I have with people about the metaverse is kind of interoperability. And I guess there's a lot of different variations and different moving parts at the moment. How do you think it will all be kind of managed to kind of converge everything together?
I mean, some ideas which I was thinking about was it could be that metaverses, or that will be that it could be like availability of metaverses, or not one metaverse, and the metaverses could be along different segments. That could be one area, for example, that we say it could be done that you have metaverses per state or per country or per region or per area. This could be, for example, one segment. The other segment I could think about is per industry or per industry cluster. It could be that you say, well, there's a segment which is more about public sector and public affairs, for example, that you say, well, there's one big area where you can do your business there. There could be one regarding the banking industry or finance industry. There could be one regarding manufacturing, which there, of course, includes not only the manufacturing process, but also regarding the other processes like sourcing, supply chain, maintenance, and also other aspects which also come in there. And then naturally, perhaps these metaverses or these areas then could be then be connected to each other to say more about industry segments. And then it's like currently, if you look at businesses, there's also currently the big topic of networks is quite big in businesses currently, that you have a network of your processes. For example, in manufacturing, then you say you have your supply chain network, you have your sourcing network, you have your network regarding also production and other areas, which is quite big. Like also there's initiatives also in Germany and in Europe regarding Catena X, which is actually an automotive network, which includes actually all business processes and all actually providers and suppliers for all of the services around that. And I can think that this could be a cluster where such a metaverse could start with all of the involved parties. I mean, that would make a lot of business sense. It's less about my opinion, it's less about the platform capabilities with the vendors to say, well, there's vendor A, B, C, D, which now has a metaverse platform, and along that, everyone will jump in. I think, especially in businesses, it would be more along the value chain and more along the networks which are needed to run the business, and they would perhaps then create a kind of call it metaverse for, call it automotive or some area or banking area and so on and so on. I mean, that's, I think, the most sensible way because also businesses, of course, would like to optimize their processes, and based on this, you can then also create money and also create revenue or create also optimization possibilities, and also the as I mentioned previously, then to get also the business outputs and outcomes. It's less actually then about devices, tools, and platforms, and also capabilities. Is more about how we can do business together in an optimal way.
I think also as well, it's, like you say, it's a very sensible way of working, because if, particularly, I guess if you look at the big automotive companies, if they, group together to form almost like a minimum set of standards of how things are done as well, then
exactly.
Then there's not that kind of almost, sorry, show me age for a second, but there's not that VHS Betamax kind of war, I guess, where it's like, kind of who's going to win out, and there's that kind of more collaborative way of thinking, isn't it, really?
Yeah. It is a more collaborative way, and there is also industry standards and interfaces currently available also for automotive groups and consortiums. That's there. It makes perhaps a lot of sense there to group them. Currently, of course, the first things is that the first automotive companies are currently looking also into metaverses, but more from specific sub-process areas. For example, as I mentioned, the area previously, warehouse management or production management or warehouse maintenance and so on and so on. But I sense that in the future it will be hopefully also then much bigger, and that also then the business processes, which of course then if you look at areas there, they are, let's say, multi-trillion-dollar businesses. It's not just a small business of hundreds of millions or whatever else, and it's growing and growing. And there's a lot of, if you go back to the commercialization, which I mentioned previously about where is possibilities even to invest. These are areas to invest, because optimizations there are really then trillions or millions of billions of dollars which can come out with optimizations, where then of course the investment then also makes sense to build up a platform and to invest money into it, because otherwise you start small with also of course with startups obviously must do, of course they start with small solutions and small areas to say, well, now we are building up metaverse solutions in this and this in this segment. And with this small processes, you can start, of course, startups need to start like this, but if you come top down to say you have consortiums of businesses and consortiums of solutions or businesses, from there actually you, of course, have a much broader impact or bigger impact if the technology evolves into, let's say, more standards.
Because that's the thing, isn't it? And I think it'll prevent industries from becoming that kind of silo thing where everyone's doing their own thing. And I think if it does kind of group together, then it does make much more sense that way. Yeah,
it does make sense, and of course it also makes sense because then it's then of course also of the network effect. I mean, if you start then that and let's say proven that you're successful, of course then more and more, if you look at automotive, for example, suppliers. And others then will be onboarded or could add on that platform and so on. I mean, that's something where you need to start actually top down to make the biggest impact. But of course, you need to start with a small set of companies and then make perhaps also this whole thing more open, so that more and more can join and also benefit from the impacts and also the outputs.
I mean, I know you kind of briefly touched on it earlier, but I mean, how much of an impact, or kind of where will be the major impacts, do you think, from an artificial intelligence point of view around the metaverse?
I see artificial intelligence play a big role in the whole area of digital twins. For example, of multimodal real-time experiences, that you really can also see how a physical machine reacts in a virtual world and also simulates that in a context of end-to-end processes and also end-to-end process chains, because that's something which I see, or we see actually as a big point. Of course, the whole topic of generative AI, that means that you can also predict and also build hierarchies, assets, and also optimize your businesses with it. For example, if you look even at warehouses, production, other physical assets that I can think about that in the future, this could play a big impact in planning and simulating, and also if you look one step further in AI, that you can really also simulate the whole chain and have also predictions there. I mean, there's endless optimization possibilities. Because at the end, you need to think about how to optimize the construction of an asset, the build, the maintenance, optimize it again when it runs, and then come back actually to perhaps reconstruct that. And I can think, based on construction and other areas, a lot of optimization possibilities. I mean, currently it's more about AI with the chatbot and ChatGPT, and is more seen as texture. The next iteration, of course, seeing more into images and image creation, and also creation of videos, creation of images, pictures, texts and songs, and whatever else you could do. But I think that midterm, that's only the starting point. I see that I can also in the future play a role in even more sophisticated things like construction or construction possibilities, or planning, or other areas. I mean, if you open, let's say, imagine a little bit, two steps further, this could be areas where generative AI could even help in reducing the construction time, reducing the time of planning or optimization also drastically. I mean, that's perhaps two steps further. We've seen it now with generation of computer code and as a first step, but that's only the first step. I can think about even more optimization possibility.
Yeah. So I guess if we kind of, jump forward a few years, which I know is at the moment almost difficult to predict, but I mean, what do you think, from a skills point of view then, for people to be successful kind of working around this, working in this industry and working around this industry, what do you think the kind of future skills will look like for for individuals kind of entering the industry?
I mean, if you look, do you mean more the broader industry, which are the end users for all of these services, or more about working in the industry to be successful in, call it the technology and
sorry, more the tech market, really, I guess, your tech industry, I should say.
I would say, based on the speed of light, which we currently see, and how these technologies are involved, I would say continuous learning, continuous adapting new capabilities. That's, I think, one of the main things which I see currently, and which is actually something which continuous learning is one of the fundamental assets which we need to have.
Yeah.
Secondly, what I would see is be a front runner, and be really in front of, let's say, consuming, understanding these kind of new services, capabilities, and quickly have the ability to really look at the horizon. So what can we do with it? Not what we can do, but actually what we can do tomorrow in the short-term perspective, which means in the horizon 1 or 0 to 1, if you call, that means in the next 6 months to 1 year, and trying to make it possible with that. But also have the ability to look further. That means what kind of new ideas you could build with that. But again, try to understand technology in a realistic way and try to predict what's possible.
Do you think it will reach a point where, I guess, it reaches a ceiling where it can't advance any further?
I mean, since I'm quite long in that business, I'm always impressed how quickly and how rapidly things are evolving. Even if you look at the curve of Moore, where prediction of capability of computer chips and their performance, it means that how quickly and how, let's say, quickly the performance of computer chips are really evolving. And in the past, there was always the point is that there's something where we say, well, at that point in time, we cannot get the chips faster anymore, or also the performance faster. And I'm always impressed about the capabilities, and I think technology will continue like this. I don't think there will be a stop. If you look at also further upcoming technologies, is it quantum computing or other ways which we can see on the horizon? I think it will continue at some point, and it will continue like this. I mean, I don't see an ending point. What I see is actually, I'm almost impressed about the capabilities, how quick these technologies are ready for the market. I mean, if you look like this curves where you can understand, okay, how much time did it take to get 1 million users for a platform? And if you look, for example, how long in the past, what we had is like, if you look at Stone Age of computer, how much time it took to get so 1 million user on the browser? Is it in the very past? It was Internet Explorer, or even before that, when you looked at Mozilla or whatever else, and then how much months, years, and quarters it took to get 1 million users on. If you look at the curve, how quickly it is now with latest platforms, is if you started from now, of course, Facebook, over now later on TikTok, or of course now even how much hours it took that ChatGPT had 1 million users on.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm always
totally,
impressed about the adaptability, and I think currently I don't see a limit, or I don't see an ending. It's and I think it's currently if all of these technologies are supporting businesses and humans, I think there's no limits to that this growth will continue. And even as I said previously at the beginning, it's so easy to use and to combine these technologies in the meantime. And there's so many people and users really, and developers creating amazing thing. I mean, it's not, I don't see it ending by now.
Yeah. What do you think will be the potential barriers to growth, or potential barriers to kind of evolution of the technology? I
mean, what I see is the danger, if you look at ethics, and if you look at also things like security, and I see there, especially if you look at generative AI, the danger of believing and not seeing what is truth and what is not truth, and adaptability to the real world. I mean, because I tend to see currently that a lot of people are believing into the results and outputs of specific generative AI solutions, where I always then come back and say, okay, you're not the expert in that area, and you need actually to validate this. I mean, in the areas of literature, is it in the areas of getting a computer code? Is it the area of, let's say, giving a scientific answer to a problem? You still need to be an expert to understand if this is real or not real, the answer, or 50% or 70% true. I mean, this is one area where I see dangerous. Let's say the outputs are believed as truth, but needs to be validated. I see ethical challenges often. Means, of course, if you look at machine learning or AI or generative AI, of course, the output that you have depends on the input. And if there's a bias actually regarding the input that you have, regarding racial, sexual, or other, let's say, biases which you have in your answers, could be also more or less, let's say, challenging and not the real truth that you have. There might be challenges, of course, with governments, regulation, but yeah, of course, there could be a lot of misuse and abuse of these modern technologies. And of course, identity. I mean, we also are working here within SAP on self-surveying identities to really then prove who is then this user, and if this user is really the right user in the network, and also in the whole, call it, processes as a Metaverse AI and other topics. It's important that you have that, but also the possibilities of anonymization, because sometimes you want to be real, like myself or Martyn, you. Sometimes you need to be anonymized. I would like to be anonymized and not be here. But of course, there also there needs to be an attachment to the real person there. And again, I see limitations more on this, but not from the technology perspective, but more about the output and outcomes that we have, which now are really often really challenging. I mean, to really prove them and let's. If you look at one last example on that, because I find it really interesting area. If you currently look at, let's say, articles in the news and articles which you get in the newspaper, they're mostly validated, which then gives you the real good newspaper from the fake newspaper. I mean, they're validated, they have journalists, they're looking into that, they're checking the facts, they're having a real way to look, okay, this really happened, and do I have proof points for it? Do I have witnesses? Can I prove this, and so on and so on? That's, of course, if you look at technology, it's mostly not existing, because you feed in information and you got output, and often this output is not validated. One side from the perspective, but also from ethical and other areas, which you also need to look at. Of course, the news that you got, the output might not be the right one, and the one to confront the end user with. And these are all aspects which I see not limitation, but actually challenges which need to be looked at and also need to be analyzed.
I think there's also, I mean, as you've kind of mentioned a couple of times there, I mean, I think the validation piece is massive, isn't it? And I think certainly, particularly in the UK at the moment, there's a lot of talk in the press that artificial intelligence is going to result in mass job losses and things like that, as kind of AI will replace people and all the rest of it. But I think there's a massive risk that companies kind of almost see AI as a money-saving tool where they can do away with certain job roles or certain people within a business and then just get AI to do the whole thing. But I guess without validation, then it's massively risky, isn't it?
Yeah, of course. And you need to still have the experts. I mean, what I see is it's similar like coming up with computers personal computers in the 80s. It means in the past you used to have a typewriter, you're typing it, you lose time. If you then stepped into have a computer where you've optimized that, which means you can quicker write text and quicker come to your results. But at the end of the day, you still need to type something and you need still to do your job. I see AI similar like this to help you to be more efficient and quicker to gather the information. But at the end, of course, you still need to have the plan and the output and the outcomes you want to achieve. And you still need to be the expert. I mean, I can not think that for example, generative AI will replace a programmer or a developer. It will help the developer to be more efficient to get the information that you want to solve. But you still need to validate that, and also you still need to optimize the whole architecture, and also you still need to develop the whole framework. But AI will help them to be much quicker, and you can transfer this to different other businesses and services. I mean, you still need to be a good lawyer. Perhaps generative AI will help you to get your searches quicker and also references quicker, and perhaps a summary quicker, which on for example, the issue you want to solve or the claim you want to put in. But on the other side, you need to understand in detail what you want to solve, and also you need to see if this is all valid or not, and if the outputs and outcomes are valid or not.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. I think all in all, it certainly seems like, it's a really exciting time though, isn't it? And I think particularly in terms of what's on the horizon, it's super exciting to see what happens over the next couple of years, really.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I'm always impressed every day looking into forums and looking into announcements, which has, again, how things are, let's say, involved so quick and also in a couple of months and quarters. I mean, I see that the speed of innovation is much higher. And it will become more and more as a community approach. It means what we also think about, also here at SAP, I think that the metaverse and metaverse topics are not an isolated thing. It means you still need to have all of the players in with experiences, with the creator economy, with the special computing, with the decentralization, with human interfaces, which you have, for example, with all of the devices, hardware device or not hardware device, it means it depends, and also the infrastructure with underlaying all of that. You need to have all of the players together. Of course, there will be more players coming, or let's say more bigger players coming to more or less then drive the experience piece or drive the human interface piece with the devices or the infrastructure underneath. But on the other side, they all need to work combined together, because again, I see the metaverse more about a mix of technologies. And the good thing is on that and capabilities, the good thing on this technology and capabilities is they will grow, and there will be more capabilities coming in, and also more platforms and tools will come in. Perhaps others will disappear on the other side. But it's with this open tool set, you will be able to develop things much quicker and also adapt new technologies much quicker, of course, and that's something which is really, really amazing and really, let's say, gives creativity a big place.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that's brilliant, though. Yeah, I really appreciate your time, Ashraf. It's been absolutely brilliant talking to you today, and I appreciate you kind of giving me your insights into the metaverse and
Thank you.
The whole world. Thank you very much.